All right, Arthur, thanks
Hey,
for
Paul.
coming on here. Today's an interesting day for us as lawyers. We saw a case in the newspaper yesterday where yet another child was abused and killed, despite the fact that city agencies apparently had some knowledge that some abuse was going on. And so there was a news conference with a lawyer, and they were saying they're suing the city. And when you read the New York Post article, you obviously get the feeling like, wow, this is a horrible, horrible tragedy, and the city maybe should have done something. And of course, the irony is that you and I, about 5 years ago, had a similar situation where a client came to us under very similar circumstances. A poor young kid was being abused by the mother's boyfriend, and the city agency, the ACS, the Association for Child Services, apparently was contacted in some fashion and clearly negligently responded to whatever information they were given. As far as we know, they went to the wrong address, which was horrible. And part of the reason they went to the wrong address was because of their training, and the call came in on a weekend. And it's just a horrible, horrible screw up by the ACS, and a horrible, horrible murder by a human being that's now in jail. And right, remember this case? Obviously, I know you can't sleep probably, right?
Unfortunately, I am too familiar with it, especially this week.
Right, because I know you handled the case and you did an unbelievable job. And just so we know what we're talking about, this week you actually took a verdict in front of a Supreme Court judge against this horrible murderer for $40 million, which is probably a record-setting verdict taken by somebody. Of course, the guy's in jail, and you and I both know it's unlikely that he'll ever be able to pay this judgment or ever amount to anything. But more interesting to me as a lawyer, and I know to you, is that we also took the case and tried to hold the city of New York through their agency, ACS, responsible for their absolutely complete screw up in dealing with this kid, which you and I both agree, if it went differently, this kid might be alive today, wouldn't you say?
100%.
So this is like the most horrible thing ever. But I remember when the case came to the office and we discussed it. And then we, as is typical, we talk to our office staff, we talk to our spouses and friends. We say, wow, listen, you run a case by them. Say, what do you think about this? And of course, this type of case, every person we ever ask has the same reaction. Obviously, first, they're horrified. But secondly, they're like, wow, you guys are going to win, right? Like the city's going to be responsible. And you and I, and from the very beginning, all the way up until the end, knew that we probably weren't going to win the case against the city. And we decided to take the case anyway. All right. And I know you and I had debates about this, and we both felt like it was important for us to take the case and try to hold the city responsible, because as lawyers, we feel like that's our obligation to sort of put a light on this and to try to change a law, if we could, that we think is really problematic.
Correct.
So here's the thing. It's like, so when I tell somebody that fact and I go, wow, look what happened to this kid, and I read it in the paper yesterday, okay, similar thing. Or when we get stories about domestic violence abuse, it's a similar thing, and somebody's calling the police, protect me from my husband, he's beating me up, or a boyfriend or something like that. And then the police really mess it up, don't respond properly, and they get sued. That's the same kind of case as what we're talking about here, right?
Correct.
Okay,
It falls under the same law.
right. So there's a law here, and it's a law that you and I really don't like. And we fought for what? How many years did we fight this case?
Since 2016. So it's been 6 years.
All right, we fought for 6 years on this case, but we lost. Now, and I remember we told the father of this child, we're going to lose probably, but we're going to try anyway, right? And we did, and you did an amazing, amazing job on the case. We did everything we could, and I think you did a great job. And we want to shine a light on it. So this law that we're talking about is this thing called special duty. And this special duty law, as far as I understand it, and you really are the expert on this now, really only benefits a few people. And in this case, it benefits government agencies. And so why? Why in the world can't I sue the police if they didn't prevent me from getting hurt or killed when I called and said this? We hear these cases all the time. And why couldn't we prevail against the city when they didn't protect this child, even though they got a call saying, hey, this child may be in danger? I don't understand that. Well, I do, but I want you to explain it to me.
Because the way the law is written, the legislator provides protection for municipal workers, for government workers, called government immunity. So you cannot sue a ACS worker, a police officer, even a firefighter for regular negligence because they're protected by government immunity. unless they establish a special relationship and create a special duty.
Let me stop you there, Alton. I sue police officers, sanitation workers, city employees. We do, you and I, all the time and prevail. What's the difference if in a case where like some city worker is negligent and hits you with their car or does something negligent, a doctor, a city doctor, and these type of cases, police or ACS responding to a call for help? Why is that different?
Because it's different if you're suing them for something they did in the course of their work, the course of their employment. If they are carrying out their government function, they are protected under this government immunity, unless they establish a special relationship and create a special duty to the particular plaintiff.
All right, now let's just be clear though. Like, so even if a police officer is driving his car and he hits you, even when he's on patrol, that's different than the cases we're talking about, right?
Sure, but even in that situation, there are slightly different rules. If they're responding to a call as opposed to just driving in the street, not responding.
I get you, but they don't have absolute immunity there. So we're talking about these cases where like a government agency like ACS in this case and the one we read in the Post yesterday get a call and some kid's in danger, or somebody's calling the police saying, hey, my husband, my boyfriend, or this ex-boyfriend is threatening me. He's going to kill me. And he ends up doing it. And why can't we win those cases?
Because it's a judgment call. They're saying if the worker made a judgment call or did something in the course of their employment, aside from driving, those are completely different issues. But here, a police officer makes a decision not to arrest somebody, and the person they didn't arrest goes and kills somebody else. That police officer is protected in that situation. So their judgment does not expose them to liability. In our case, where a ACS received a report of a child being abused, they didn't conduct the investigation in a manner that would have been appropriate. And that's what the city investigator found, that they did not do the appropriate investigation. They did not carry out their job the right way. And ultimately it led to the child, in our case, his death.
Right. Okay. So here's my understanding of those kind of cases. When in a case where you call in the police or ACS and saying, yeah, I need your help, and then they completely screw it up, which is what happened in our case, what seemed to happen in this case we read in the Post yesterday, and what we've seen happen a lot of times. All right. In those kind of cases, the city defends the cases with this governmental immunity argument, arguing you need to show a special duty. Now, what is that, right? So a special duty, as far as I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong, is the city has to, by way of their promise or action, actually assumed an affirmative duty to act. So they have to actually affirmatively do something, right? And they have to know that not doing something, not responding properly, could lead to harm, could lead to an injury. And there has to be some direct contact between the city and the injured party. Has to be that link. And the last one, which is really hard sometimes, that injured party has to justifiably rely on the municipality's inaction. So that's the law. That's what special duty is, right? I got that right?
You got that right. Yeah.
All right. So now I want you to explain to me, that's the lawyer's explanation. Now I want you to explain to me as simply as you can, because I know you explained it to our client, this poor father of this kid, and said, here's 5 years ago, whatever, 6 years ago, here's why we're going to lose. And you had to explain it to him. How would you explain it to a client?
So as we explained to the father, the only way he would have had a case is if he proved he was the one that made the call to ACS. The ACS workers made an affirmative promise to him to do something specifically.
Right. So what would that be? That would be them saying, hey, Dad, we're coming. We're going to come to help.
Don't call the police. Don't do anything else. Stay put. Some kind of directive that the father then relied on because of what he was told. And then the harm stemmed from that promise that he relied on.
Okay, got it. Now I understand that. So now here's my question to you. That sounds ridiculous. How in the world can you prove that?
It's written in a way that makes it practically impossible to have a valid case the way it's written. They created loops and hoops to jump through that make it impossible from a very practical standpoint, because the injured party has to be the one to make the phone call. So the plaintiff has to be the one to make the report, be given the promise, rely on the promise, and then suffer the harm. When we know in reality what we are dealing with are children in very vulnerable situations. And oftentimes the calls do come from an anonymous source. And it becomes practically impossible to hold ACS or the government accountable for something that is very clearly their error.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, that's just crazy. So let me change the fact pattern a little bit. Let's imagine my wife is beating me up. All right. It's a complete story. All right. She's fantastic. She would never let's make up this story. She's beating me up and I'm fearful for my life. She keeps telling me, I'm going to come to your office and I'm going to kill you. And I'm so fearful that I pick up the phone and I call the police and I say, I tell you what, I'm really concerned. My wife's going to come kill me. And the police say, okay, we're coming to your house right now. We're going to stop her from breaking in and everything like that. And they tell me, don't move, stay right there. We'll be there in a second. And I then rely on that and go, all right, I'm going to sit tight. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to get my own gun. The cops are coming. I'm going to be fine. They'll be here any minute. And I wait and I wait and I wait and I wait. And then I get killed. Did I got a case there?
Probably not.
Why not?
Well, first of all, the proof that's required, how would somebody be able to prove your reliance on that when from a very practical standpoint, you had a phone conversation with the police? It's practically impossible to establish that pattern, that connection. Your conversation, what was promised to you, your mindset in relying on that promise, and then the active negligence on the part of the police officers to respond to that call.
That's interesting. So that's this justifiable reliance, right? That's what that is?
Correct.
Boy, that sounds so like lawyerly. Like what a bunch of, I don't want to say it here, like, and I'm a lawyer. Sounds ridiculous to this standard of proof for special relationship or special duty in order to hold a municipality responsible when they screw up like ACS did in our case, or like we see in some of these police cases. Crazy, right?
It's really upsetting.
Well, all right. So then here's a question for you, okay, for maybe somebody that's watching this. You and I knew all of this when this poor father came to us with this horrible, nightmarish situation. And in fact, my recollection is that he had even spoken to other lawyers who wouldn't take the case, right? And he came to us and we said, well, we are going to take the case. And we prosecuted the case for, I thought it was a few years. You're telling me 5 or 6. I mean, wow. That's incredible. All right, and I know the work you put into the case. It was mostly you. Why in the world did we take the case? Why did you prosecute the case? With my approval, by the way, but why?
Because this is how change gets made. What we do, we fill in the gaps where the government fails. And this is how you do that. You bring a case with specific fact patterns that may raise the attention of the court, of the legislator, where someone takes a second look at it and says, maybe the law is wrong. Maybe it's time to change it. And I believe you agreed with me, that this was a case where the court should have taken a stronger, harder look at this law, this government protection in these situations where ACS has a mandate to protect children and they fail. Unfortunately, in our case, the court didn't do that. They just regurgitated the same old law, the same protection for ACS and government workers.
You know what? I'm with you, and I remember the argument, and I read your papers, and I worked on them with you, and I remember the decision. And I have to say, while I didn't like it, it's probably in line with the state of the law in New York right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Correct. There is a case, the Coffey case against the city of New York, longstanding, many years, and the judge got it right based on the law, the way it's written. The law has to change.
Well, you know what, Arthur? One way to change the law is to do what you did and what we did as a firm, which is to challenge it. And I think that's what we did in this case. And I think we did a good job in a tragic situation. The end result of the case, though, was also interesting in that we did not win the case against the city and there was nothing we could do. And then we took a verdict against this horrible murderer who's in jail and where he should be. So we now have a civil judgment against him in the amount of $40 million. Now that sounds like we did something good, right? And it's certainly the only thing left that we could have done. What's the practical effect of this $40 million judgment that you got?
I guess a symbolic victory, some sense of justice, aside from the jail sentence that he did receive, which very light. The murderer did take a plea bargain and got 15 years. So this is an additional level of some sense of justice. Practically speaking, what they will have is a piece of paper valid for 20 years saying this person owes them this amount of money. If and when he gets out of jail, they can try to collect on him. If he has a job or comes into any money, hits the lotto, they can try to collect on from him.
Pretty hard to do that, though. But my understanding is, so the judgment we have, if this guy gets out of jail and starts working, we can garnish, meaning we can take only 10% of his salary, assuming he doesn't file bankruptcy, which he might do. Or like you said, if somehow this guy hits the lottery or something like that, we could try to collect on the judgment, and it's good for 20 years. But, as a lawyer, was there anything else that you think we could have done for this family?
Unfortunately, I think we did everything we can. But at this point, I think there is a little more we can do. This number, although symbolic, it could raise some eyebrows, and I think it can get the conversation started. Hopefully someone hears this, someone sees this and says, well, what is this about? Maybe it is time to take a second look at this law. And that's what I hope will come out of this.
That's great. You know what, Arthur? I'm a big believer in that. I know you know me a long time. I'm with you. These are horrible cases. This is a very complex law that applies to this type of horrible case. You and I have very strong personal feelings about this law and professional as lawyers. We don't agree with it. We tried to change it. We did what we could do as lawyers to do that. And you know what? I got to tell you, I'm proud of everything you did on it and we did as a firm. It's all you could do as a lawyer. And like you said, maybe somebody will see the verdict or read about the case or watch this podcast or something and say, wow, somebody should do something about that. Hopefully that's the case.
Yep.
Either way, you did a good job.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks.